Welcome back to Prime Your Life. We talk about the word purpose quite a lot, but do we understand what that is? Well, today I have Mr. Brad Bucceri from SenseMaker, and he's going to bring some sense to that word purpose. Hi, Brad. How are you today?
Very good, thanks. Yourself?
I am top of the world, thank you very much. Yes. Purpose. Now, is it a bit kind of emperor's new clothes and a kind of a message that we're all grappling onto, but actually doesn't mean anything? Or is there real substance behind this word purpose, Brad?
I think there's a lot of substance. I think it's had a bad rap, but for me on my journey, I've got to the point where I have increased understanding around what it means and what it is. And so I think that there's this renewed sense of value in the word purpose, especially in the days that we live in now, where a lot of people are struggling with a sense of fulfillment, a sense of impact that they're making in the world. And I think, yes, there's a lot of value in that word.
Well, that's a relief because that's what we're going to talk about. As a slightly challenging question, what gives you the right, Brad, to talk to us about purpose today?
That's a good question. So for me, a lot of my life was spent trying to figure out what my purpose was. So my background was in user experience design, digital design, marketing, and I never really got on with school. And so to get into that industry, I needed to become average at a number of different skills so that I could create projects myself to prove to these people that I could do what I said I could do. I didn't have a piece of paper to my name to say that. So I was always average at a number of things, and I was aware that there was people who were very good at specific activities, specific skills. And it really bugged me that I couldn't figure out what mine was. And so there was kind of these two streams of my life. Professionally, I was doing well in my job, but privately, I was kind of always grappling with this idea of what my purpose is. And a longish story short, I had an epiphany one day. The lights kind of came on for me, and I realized that everybody's purpose is unique. They might look similar, but they're actually unique because every individual is individual, right? Nobody thinks exactly like you do. Nobody solves problems like you do. No one's had the same journey as you. And so this thought occurred to me, if I could extract somebody's purpose and blend that with what I know about marketing, you can help people to make their business one of a kind. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am. And in doing that, realized that my purpose is helping people kind of switch the lights on themselves and reconnect with theirs.
Well, tell us about that epiphany. Where were you? What happened? And what did you do next?
So it was kind of a multi-layered thing. I think two parts of it kind of spring to mind whenever I talk about it. And the first is this, just speaking to other people. You know, it was kind of in conversation with somebody where it wasn't planned. It wasn't what we were trying to do. And I repeated back to somebody what they had said to me in my way, just to make sure that I could understand. I understood properly what they were talking about. And for them, the lights came on. They were like, "Oh my goodness, I'd never thought of it like that." And I realized that I could do that with other people, and that's this kind of sense-making skill that I've got. And there was that, but then there was also this idea of knowing how to explain what we do as a business, and it was always very frustrating. How do we make that work? How can we put that in a way that resonates with the people that we want to help? And those two things kind of came together, where I realized, you know, if you're sharing your personal journey and you're kind of infusing that into your business, it's going to resonate with people who are on a similar walk with that you were on. It's going to resonate with those people, and they're going to understand where you're coming from. They're going to see that you've been on a journey that they need to take, and they're going to want you as an expert guide to help them along that way to have the same transformation that you've had. So it's kind of multi-layered, and they come together like that. Yeah.
So paint me a picture of a plumber with purpose then. Let's just say we're a tradesman and we're fixing people's heating, pipes, that kind of stuff. And how does a plumber go about running that kind of business with purpose?
I think it's about your why, and I know Simon Sinek talks about all of this, and I've read those books until I was blue in the face, but none of it ever really clicked for me. But with regards to somebody that's doing a job like that, and I think it doesn't matter if you have your own business or if you're employed. If you know what your purpose is, you can live that out in your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be at work. And so it's about your driving motivations. It's about why you want to help people, and then using whatever your business is or whatever your job is to do those things for people. So knowing what your anchor point is, what is it that fuels you? What is it that keeps you on the straight and narrow every day? And then knowing what your purpose is and using those two things to fuel your everyday life to make positive impact in the lives of other people.
Okay. So could he or she, the plumber, price more purposefully, or what's a specific example you
Sure.
think that kind of business could run it with purpose as well as people, planet, and profit and everything else?
Sure. So I think it comes down to this idea of balancing purpose and profit. So I've been guilty of this myself in the past when you work for somebody, and I know a lot of other people do this. I see it all the time. You think to yourself, I could do this myself, or I'm going to start this business and get out of this job that I'm in because this is going to be so much better. It's going to be easier. I can make all this money. And so you set off on this mission to start a business with the sole purpose of making money. And you realize very quickly that if that is your only motivation, you're going to run out of steam very quickly. And so I think it's this idea of balancing purpose and profit. So when you talk about pricing, I think price becomes irrelevant when you're able to present what you're doing in a way that makes people see that you're the only option for them. So if you can understand that it's about the service or the product that you're providing, but it's more about understanding the people that you're serving. So what is it ultimately that they want? Why are they doing the things that they're doing? Why do they have the house that they have, right? If you're a plumber, they want a certain lifestyle. They have a certain dream in their mind. How can I connect the solution I'm providing and the problem they're having to where they want to be? And how can I show them that me or my service or my product is the best way for them to get from where they're stuck to where they want to be?
So just taking that metaphor to reality, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, the radiator's just exploded, and I've got water rushing through the ceiling. And you talked about price being pertinent to the person that's available at that point in time. So does the plumber with purpose price according to the fact that they are the only person available at 4 o'clock and therefore they're going to surge demand price it? Or are they going to connect with value, thinking this is a person in ultimate distress and therefore I'm going to price fairly based on fixing it to create a long-term relationship?
I think it comes to, with something like that, it comes down to a point of values, like you say, honor, integrity. And I think if you're balancing purpose and profit, you've probably got a good sort of sense of how you want to treat other people, and you're not going to want to take advantage of them. You might have slightly different pricing for out of hours, but I think surge pricing, where you know that it's fish in a barrel, basically people have no choice. I think that it's less about that and more about saying, look, I know that I'm here to help people. So for example, if I'm working with somebody and I allot 10 hours to complete a piece of work with them, if we don't get to the place where I feel like we've done a satisfactory job or we've not quite unpacked everything that needs to be unpacked, that 10 hours still stands, and I'll work with them until it's finished. And I think that's balancing purpose and profit and saying, look, I understand that what I'm doing is important here, but I also understand that I need to make money because I've got to live. But let's get this finished. I've made a commitment to you. Let's get this finished. Let's all have a good result at the end of it.
Good. We're recording this in February 2025, and I think the world is reacting to a new world order in the United States. And I'm hearing some discourse about the way that diversity, inclusion, and fairness are being represented by the new president. How are you hearing that with your clients, and particularly leaders suddenly having a little bit of a distraction, thinking, well, hang on a minute, these people are talking about that. Perhaps we should now be changing our rhetoric. What's your I don't want to get into the politics, but what's your counsel when purpose suddenly becomes slightly protracted?
I think, and this might sound like a bit of a strange answer, but I'll give it to you and then you can tell me what you think of it. So I think from my perspective, it's kind of counterintuitive. But what I would say to people is when you know the impact that you want to make and the point that you're aiming at, right, which is I always try and help people to narrow down what it is they're trying to get the world to believe as it relates to what your way of thinking, right? I always try and say, look, what is that point? And then almost forget about everything else that's going on in the world. So with almost a single track mind saying, I believe I've got something that's going to improve the lives of other people. It doesn't matter what's going on outside of any of that. My objective is just to run that race and to finish that and to get people, as many people on board with what I believe, to have that transformation that I know that they can have and do that, because I know that that's the difference that I can make. When it comes to things like those politics and those bigger issues, sometimes it's very difficult to make an impact in those places. And I think it can be a distraction from the overall the objective that we're trying to achieve as it relates to our purpose.
Mm. And if I'm suddenly thinking I want to be more let's go back a bit. And if I'm a business owner, I'm wanting to try to be more purposeful. That was better, wasn't it? Purposeful. I just messed that up on the pre-record. That didn't work either, did it? Let's go back again. Let's try not to be funny with this, Brad. Eh? And if I was a business owner and I'm trying to be more purposeful, what would be the steps that you would take me through in order for me to take that mission forward?
Sure. So I think a bit of context around purpose and business and where my thinking comes from on this, kind of backing up the theory that I've got, if you like. And so way back years ago, the best way to get your product out there, or the product that would win, was the one that had the most interesting or newest feature, and the business or business owner that had a bit of money to advertise that. That would be the one that would win. Then the population of the world or the locale that you're in increased, and it became harder to do that. Everybody was competing with each other. So it became a case of who looks the most trustworthy, who looks the best. Again, number of people increase in the marketplaces, and it becomes difficult to compete in that regard. And so then comes along this concept of positioning, right? And that's about saying, okay, I understand that my competition are in this crowded marketplace over here. And so in the mind of my audience, everybody that provides X service is going to be lumped into that group. How can I distance myself from that group so that I'm not in that noisy place in the mind of my audience, so that when they're making a buying decision as it relates to the service I'm providing or the product I'm selling, I'm the only choice. And it's not about saying, okay, there's all these other people there, let's drive them down on price. Then if you think about that, so that concept of positioning comes from a book by Al Ries and Jack Trout called Positioning. And it was written in 1980 something. Since then, the population has gone from like 4 billion to 8 billion. So even with positioning, it's still very difficult to find that unique space in the mind of your prospect.
So look, just let me unpack that. So let's just say I have now created a unique product. Nobody else has got it. And I'm thinking, Tetra Pak, yes. The things that we all still put our milk in, and there's nobody else got it because they've obviously got patent rights on it.
Yes.
Is it then right to build a business with purpose baked in mind from the get-go if we're wanting to be good business owners?
I think so, because even with an example like Tetra Pak, they would have had a reason behind doing what they were doing. They were solving a problem for people. They were creating a solution that they really believed in. It wasn't just about making money. I mean, I can't prove that, but I would say that with something like that, where there's an innovation, it's very often, it's not just about making money. And just remind me of the second part of your question.
The second part is, is it right that is when we're thinking about launching or setting up a new business, do we start with the good intentions in mind? So let's just say Tetra Pak, to continue the metaphor, they would talk about sustainability, recyclability, and maybe how do we price it for different communities in the world based on their availability to purchase that product.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to understanding your values going in. What are your values? What's important to you? And then translating that forward into your brand. Yeah.
Okay, so carry on with the steps. And so we've got the price, we kind of got the impact in terms of how do we make sure that that's going to be relevant to our blue ocean, red ocean strategy,
Sure.
not fighting with everybody else in the competition. Where do we go next?
So to just jump back to the analogy or the description around positioning, the population doubled when they wrote that book. The population since has doubled to 8 billion people. So even with positioning, it's very difficult to find a blue ocean, as you say, or to create a blue ocean in the mind of your audience. And so that's where this concept that I've got comes in, where I call it positioning with purpose. And so you can actually use and leverage your purpose to distance yourself from that group. And I think very often people start a business or they go into business and they're told to pick a niche or pick a market. And so we always end up with this kind of poor fit label that we put on ourselves because we don't realize that we're allowed to play around with the market or the niches. And what I mean by that is, for example, brand strategy, the idea of brand strategy, that's such a huge label in the creative industry. And so a creative agency might go into that space working on brand work for people, and they'll say, oh, we're involved in brand strategy, but they have this really uncomfortable sense because it's not actually a good fit label for them. It doesn't articulate what it is they do. It doesn't demonstrate their uniqueness. It doesn't demonstrate their value. And so it's critical to be able to drill down into who you are, your purpose, what makes you unique, the language you use around that, and then look at how you can leverage all of that to create this new space that you can operate in, where you create the rules around your product, the rules of engagement, pricing, etc.
And the values then, let's talk about leadership and values and walking the talk, as it's one of those phrases that people mention. Are values just to have on the plaque on the outside of the building, or are values inherent to how people work?
I think that the former happens a lot because people think it's the right thing to do, but it's very superficial. If you're And a good example of this in positioning is when people realize or they recognize that they're not articulating or they're not communicating the uniqueness of their business to people. Very often they'll see the latest bandwagon and they'll start planting trees when it's not something that they actually passionately believe in. They think it's going to look good and they think it's going to make them unique. And it's very superficial. It's like a Band-Aid or a plaster that's stuck over the top of an issue. And the problem with that is that it's not authentic and it's hard to sustain, and it becomes very difficult to actually deliver what you want your audience to hear in an authentic way, because you kind of lose your identity. You get this sort of unclearness that starts to appear in your marketing, in your business, and that affects everything, right down to the people that you're hiring. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know who your business is or what your business is, it's going to be very difficult to hire the right people into that team. And so superficial values don't work. It has to come from the inside out, of who you are, who the founder is, who the leadership team are, what they believe, the mission that you're on, and the change that you're trying to affect in the world. And then that will cascade out, because once you know all of that information, you'll be able to say, this is who we are. Let's broadcast that message. Number one, you're going to get people who say, I identify with this company, I want to work with them. And on the other side, if you're hiring people, you're going to be able to say, we've got this resume from somebody, they don't quite fit the mission that we're on, but this person does. And so it informs a lot of what you're doing.
I call it moments of truth, and it's those moments of crisis where the leadership team is tested and suddenly they are incongruent to their values. And I think there's no place for hoodwinking your customers or your employees, because you can destroy a reputation in milliseconds these days with social media.
Yeah.
From a good business perspective, Brad, is there a company or an organization that you really respect for somebody that lives their purpose and their values every day that you just think, now that's a shining star?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think that we try to be that business that you've talked about. And so I don't know if I've necessarily spotted one where I think, I mean, it might be something I'd have to think about a bit more. No one's ever asked me that. So that's a good question. We try to do that ourselves. So we know what our values are. We know what our mission is. And we try to live that out in an authentic way, in an honorable way with integrity. And our hope is that that's visible to people. But in terms of a business who has, by way of example, who has said, look, we understand that there's a better way of doing something. Here's how we can take that to the world and transform the experience people are having. I think one that always stands out for me is Dyson, James Dyson. And this is more about how he's positioned his product to enable people to have a transformation, but also to differentiate his business rather than maybe his personal values. I don't know him that, in enough detail to be able to comment on that. And the example with James Dyson that always interests me is that he didn't create something completely new. He was in the marketplace of vacuum cleaners, and he said, I'm going to create a better way of doing this. He saw the opportunity to expand on a bubble within that busy sector, and he differentiated his Hoovers with his name, Dyson Vacuum Cleaners. And he was delivering the same outcome, which is a clean house or a hoovered floor. He made an interesting promise with his, though. He said, you're going to have a more thoroughly hoovered floor. And he recognized that he would need to prove that result to somebody. And so he came up with the clear Hoover cylinder, the bagless cylinder, so people could see the dirt. They could see the transformation happening in their house. And then he cemented that transformation with his brand by registering the trademark of his cyclone technology. And so that's always a really interesting example for me of taking a busy marketplace and having an innovation and distancing yourself from the noise of the competition. And with that came the opportunity for him to have elevated pricing and to get paid what he was worth, what his idea was worth. And that's a blueprint that anybody can follow.
Well, you've just opened up the comments there to Dyson in terms of whether or not he runs a business based on good moral values of offshoring and everything else. But we'll leave that for the comments. Feel free to find Brad on LinkedIn if you wish. Now, age and times of life of purpose. I know I've listened to you talk about this before in terms of first mountains, second mountains. Can a young entrepreneur at the outset of being driven to success have good purpose, or does it come with age like a nice wine?
I think that's difficult for me to answer. I can only answer from my experience with it. And for me, it came later. I think I was, as a youngster, my focus was financial. I always thought I need to make this money. I want to make this amount of money, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to set up this business. But as times have progressed, as I've got older, I've recognized that that's not going to last. It's a quick burn, and it's very difficult to have the fuel and the energy inside to see something through if you're not driven by that purpose. So for me, at least, it's something that's come later on. But I think it's not to say that it can't happen. I think there are some people who are gifted in the sense that they're aware of this idea of purpose and change that they want to make from quite a young age, and they run with that. And I think if that's you, go for it. But if it's not, don't feel like you've missed the boat. By any means. I think it can happen at either stage of life, any stage of life. Yeah.
And do you think that there are generational tides of purpose in that millennials, Gen Z, or the noughties, are we more conscious of purpose now, bearing in mind things that are happening in the world?
I don't know. That's another good question. I don't know if we're more conscious of it, but I think we're more in need of it than ever. I think for me, when I look around and I see this surge in people struggling with mental health and with depression and with a sense of worthlessness or lack of meaning, it says to me that people need to know what their purpose is more than ever. And I think once we understand what our purpose is and why we're here and how we are able to positively impact the lives of other people, I think everything becomes a bit better for us. We get the energy to do what we need to do every day. We have the drive to keep going. I know that we've talked about this concept of marathons. We have that drive to keep putting one foot in front of the other when we feel like quitting. And it helps us to stay focused. And you, like I said earlier, you can live that purpose out, whether it's in your own business or in employment. And if you have a sense of fulfillment, if you know that you're making a positive impact in the lives of other people, it makes you feel better about yourself straight away. Helping others always makes you feel better. And I think we need it more than ever.
I agree. And I do have a similar worry about the anxiety and mental wellness of our world at the moment. Can we talk about the word ego and how the ego can take charge to perhaps swerve us off our purpose, because the ego suddenly gets comparison to others, or actually there's a sense of ideology or beliefs or societal norms that the ego is trying to live up to. Can you just unpack any of that by way of psychology or thought process of countering the impact of ego and intention?
Sure. I think if we're setting out on a mission like this to have this impact that we want to have, I think very often we're going to be going places and doing things that are uncomfortable to ourselves. And so I think from my point of view, the battle against ego is lessened, because you're kind of always outside your comfort zone and potentially feeling a little bit vulnerable, because the stuff that you're sharing is probably going to be quite personal and meaningful to you. And so it's going to be, it's harder for that ego to creep in and be like, yeah, look, I'm the best at this. What's probably more of a challenge is dealing with that imposter syndrome. So the flip side of that coin, and realizing that actually you do have something valuable to share with the world, and knowing what you want to say and how to say that and how to deliver that to people is going to go a long way in building that confidence in doing that. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's kind of my perspective on it.
No, I'll happily accept that. Brad, talk to the person right now that's listening. They've got this far and they're just knowing that they're living a life that is out of kilter with their purpose. Tell them or describe to them, what is the impact of them living a life that is out of alignment with their purpose?
Living a life that's out of alignment with your purpose is generally going to make you feel pretty, this is speaking from experience because that's where I came from, right? So I was in a place where I was never clinically diagnosed, but I think I was depressed. I went through a place of depression because I felt like I was just working for the sake of working. I didn't feel like I was making any real impact. The work I was doing was good, but I wasn't making a difference anywhere. I didn't know who I was or who I was supposed to be. And I felt lost, to be perfectly honest with you. I felt lost. And coming into alignment with my reason for being here, which is helping other people to find their purpose or reconnect with their purpose, I think it gave me a reason to do. So I think, knowing what your anchor is, what is the foundation that you start your day on, and then having your purpose laid over the top of that gives you the springboard that you need to tackle each day, day by day. And I think planning for the future, but not thinking too far, not living in the future. So just saying, okay, here's today. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow because tomorrow will bring challenges that are sufficient for that day. Let me tackle today's challenges and work through it in that way.
Mm-hmm. And what about the person that says, yes, but Brad, yes, but Brad, it's all very well saying that, but I have to pay the bills. I've got to do this job. I have expectations and needs to meet for my family and those that depend on me. The yes, but message, how do you challenge that?
That's interesting, actually, and a timely question. So my wife is currently working in a role. I won't say what role, but she's in a job, And she's done that for her entire life. She's at a place where she's saying, I don't know if that's what I want to do anymore. I love helping people, but I'm not quite happy doing that. And so what I'm doing with her is actually engineering this from the ground up, helping her. It sounds a bit callous when I say it in that way, but deliberately doing it, as you were asking earlier. Can you start a business deliberately with this in mind? And so I'm saying to her, okay, here's your natural set of skills. Here's the things that you love. What is important to you? Okay, you've given me this list of things. Here's what you're naturally good at. And here's the thing that you want to be doing, building a business in this area. How can we marry those two things up and work on that on the side until it gets to a place where it's this idea of being on two skis going in slightly opposite directions? There's going to come a point where you have to let one go to go with the other. How can we do that and give you a sense of fulfillment on the side whilst you're building that, and until it comes time to let go of the old to pursue the new?
Mm. I fully condone that. And actually, sometimes you could almost have a side hustle itch that you could scratch that is in congruency with your daytime career. So you could be working a 9 to 5 that you perhaps feel is a little bit out of sync, but you might volunteer at a soup kitchen or the church or a community group. And that gives you a sense of worth and a sense of value. What are your views on volunteering and being a part of a community to fulfill your purpose whilst not working?
Yeah, I think if it's aligned with how you want to help and the change that you want to be in the world, if it's aligned with your start point, then go for it. If it doesn't fit, don't feel like you've got to shoehorn yourself into doing the soup kitchen. Because if it doesn't feel like you and it doesn't feel like who you are, then you're going to still end up with this feeling of a lack of fulfillment. And so I think it's about saying, what are the things that intrigue me? And I've mentioned this on a couple of other podcasts as well. And I like to say, let's look back through your life journey. What are some of the key moments that light you up where you are helping other people? What are those? And you'll have this golden thread that's running through. How can we kind of unpick that, pull that out and make it clearer in our own minds? Because sometimes there'll be these events that have occurred that would amount to what I call the golden thread. But because of the different scenarios they occurred in, we'd place different labels on them. And so they would look like different things. But actually, if we take a step back and we kind of group these things together, is there a collective label we can put on those things? Start unpacking that and get that golden thread, and then start to weave that into what we're doing. Say, okay, I did this thing a while ago and I really enjoyed doing that. How can I do that for people now, even whilst I'm still employed? How can I help people in that way? And start doing that. See how you feel. See how it impacts other people. Is it giving them a transformation? And if it is, keep going.
Tell us about your golden thread then, Brad. When was a moment of pride with a customer or a client you've made them think differently about their purpose and then they took action?
It's really interesting, actually. I think there's a couple that stand out, a couple of scenarios that really stand out in my mind. One was a lady that I worked with who had some really challenging experiences, and they were kind of part of her business, but not quite. And it was almost holding her back, these experiences. And this pattern that I'm describing fits for two distinct people in my mind, actually. So it is a common kind of thing, but it was kind of holding her back. And these people start a business because of that thing from their non-conscious mind. People don't realize in these scenarios, they don't realize that they're starting a business because of these situations that they've been through. And so they kind of lose their way with their living out their why. But what happened when I was going through these process with them, some of them kind of burst into tears. Other people kind of sat back in their chair and with a shriek of excitement when they realized that it was the challenges that they'd been through that was giving meaning to everything that they were doing in their business. It suddenly made those times when business was tough, it made sense to them. That was why I couldn't just let that go. It's because I was doing it to help people who are stuck where I was. And so it's this idea of recognizing the challenges that we've been through and we've come through, and saying, how can we kind of infuse that experience into our business and broadcast that message to people who are out there who are stuck where we once were, so that we can bring them on this journey to have the transformation that we've had. And I think one of the things that's most challenging with that is very often in our own personal walks, we tend to have aspirations of reaching a certain place or being like a certain person in our industry, that we forget that the information that we hold right now and the experiences that we hold right now are going to be valuable to people who are stuck where we were. And so we dismiss what we've got now because we think that there's no worth in it. But actually, that's where the gold is.
Well, sometimes we dig for gold and we give up too quickly. What about the phrase that I use sometimes, and I used it on myself, which is pursuing a purpose that is claps without coins, where everybody says, yeah, you're doing a great job, Chris. We need more people like you. But then you look at the bank balance and go, yeah, but I need to live. And this pursuit of purpose is actually delivering me no relative value to what actually I need to do to survive. Yeah. Where do you work with people on that mindset of saying to them, yeah, it's fantastic, this mission that you're on, but actually you need to look after the imperatives as well, which is putting money in the bank?
Yeah. So at the highest level on that scenario, it's our purpose and profit scale. And so there's 3 states that scale can be in. It can be too far weighted in profit, it can be balanced with purpose and profit, and it can be too far weighted in solely purpose and helping everybody and charging nothing for it because you feel like you should help. And I think that the way that we deal with that is to say, I understand the change that I want to be. I understand the change I want to bring to people. Let me look at how I can take this. Sure, there are some people that I help at no cost because I like to give, okay, personally. And so perhaps that's something you can do to satisfy that desire in yourself. But then on the other hand, saying, here's the transformation I can bring. How can I align that with something that my audience really wants so that I can justify that charge? So when I'm bringing the transformation to them and I'm helping them to have that experience, it's mutually beneficial because I can see where it's going to take them as much as they can see where it's going to take them, and the exchange of value is equal, so that there's no problem them giving me the money and me accepting the money, and also me giving them the knowledge and them accepting the knowledge.
Well, I'm glad that you take that time to balance those scales, because at the end of the day, sometimes money can create huge benefit. I'm thinking Bill Gates, and just listening to what he's been talking about recently with his legacy and his statements, he's given away more than I think the whole US defense budget in one year. And then I can also think of Tony Robbins, an amazing inspirational speaker, and he has a really big driver to try to feed as many hungry Americans as possible. And the more money he makes, he knows that he's helping deliver more benefits to more people. So is it okay sometimes to drive for more money when we know that there's a quasi benefit that helps others?
I think that focusing on the money is the wrong objective. If you focus on bringing people change and transformation and a better life, the money will naturally follow. So long as we're not letting ourselves fall into that trap of unbalanced scales here. If you focus on bringing change and transformation, the money will always follow, and then you're able to do what you want to do with it. And that's what I always say to people. When you're thinking about how can I position what I've got in a way that makes people want it, we need to look at their ultimate desire. So if you're business to business, very often, it comes down to increased wealth, better health, or better relationships. And very often in business to business, the end result is going to be increased wealth. And that might sound callous to people, but the truth of the matter is that people very rarely want increased wealth for the sake of just more money. It's always, I want more money so that I can. And so if you can connect what you've got with other people's so that I can, then it's going to be infinitely easier to do what you're talking about.
Tell us about SenseMaker and your short-term or medium-term targets as to what it means to you then in terms of what's your so that.
So for us, the goal is to is to educate people, to open people's eyes, and to help to unlock their full potential. So we talk about something that we call the unclear. And the unclear is something that makes its way into the spaces within your business, your marketing space, your business operations space. And everybody starts their business with a purpose, right? And so what is the reason that you started your business, and how close are you to that end result, that dream that you want? And for us, there's no greater value than helping people to untangle their unclears and use that mess to create meaning and to reconnect where they're stuck with the dream that they want. So our dream really is to reconnect people with their reason for starting, and to help them to get back on that road.
And do you have any numbers, targets in terms of how many people, how many businesses that you're setting against that mission?
No official number, actually. No, that's a good question. We don't have an official number, but yeah, we work with one-to-ones. We work one-to-one, and we work with people. It's a very specific type of person. You have to want change. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you know that it's going to get you to a better place. And that's the people that we love to be around, is people that want change and want to make change positively in their business and in other people's lives. And when those people find us, or when we find them, we try and build relationships. And so there's no official number around that, but we're always looking for people that are like-minded.
Well, like-minded. How do you deal with a customer then that doesn't align with your values?
If we do end up in a situation like that, I think it's always best and the least damaging option to agree to disagree and part ways. I've had it before where there was somebody that came to me. They thought they wanted what I was presenting, and it turned out that it was more of a quick fix. And I said, look, this isn't a quick fix. This is sort of deep. It's structural. It's something that needs to happen from the inside out, and it will enable those things that you want to do. But there's not some sort of magic bullet. And we agreed to leave it where it was and part ways. And I think so often, and myself included, we can be misled by this idea that there's a shortcut. So often we see on social media people saying, do these 3 things and you'll have £1 million in your bank account tomorrow. But actually what they're offering you is a shortcut to the door that leads to the long road to success. And there's no shortcut to success. And so that's how I would kind of deal with it, yeah.
Well, hopefully you're not going to be talking to any clients too soon about that lack of alignment.
No.
Weighing up the scales of optimism and pessimism about the planet going forward, Brad, how are you feeling about our alignment to purpose as a planet overall? Are you positive or a little bit negative about where we're going?
I think that the Earth or the planet has never been in more of a disorganized, chaotic state. I don't know how to put that positively.
Don't pull your punches, mate. Just go for it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's the truth. I think it's more chaotic than ever, and I think knowing what your grounding is, what your anchor is crucial to that. So I have my anchor. I have a certain way that I start my day every day, and then I set about spreading my message. And I think that's the best thing I can do. I think it can be very easy to sit and look at the way things are going and to get into a bit of a stall. But if everybody knows what their purpose is and everybody is working for the better of others, and we just do that consistently, that has to have a positive impact.
Well, listeners are going, tell us about your day. Tell us about what's your secret golden thread then for starting your day, Brad?
So every day I start off, my purpose is grounded in my faith. So every day I start off with my Bible. I'm reading my Bible. I'm working through that. I'm looking at it saying, how does this apply to me? How can I apply this in my life, in my business? How can I use this to better the experience that my clients are having? How can I help my clients to use this this insight and understanding that I'm getting from there? And then on top of that, my purpose sits, which is to reconnect others with their reason for being and helping them to have that same sort of anchor, that same purpose, so that they can go out and share their light, their understanding, their knowledge, their transformations with the world.
And the person that's sitting there now with their arms crossed, listening in the car, going, well, yeah, it's all right for you, mate, but trying to do that with 3 kids rushing around and doing this and that and everything else, don't tell me about getting myself centered, putting my hand on the Bible.
Yeah.
What's your message to the person that's a little bit cynical about how their day starts?
I've got 2 kids. I've got 2 kids running about, and my wife works night shifts. So very often I'm doing the mornings, I'm doing the school runs, but I get up a little bit earlier. Not crazy early, you know, none of this sort of burn yourself out stuff. A little bit earlier, or I'll get it at the end of the day if my day's gone a little bit sideways. But I think it doesn't have to be this huge, big, intense, laborious thing. It's more of a lifestyle. And I heard an analogy once: if you want to build a great wall, you got to focus on laying the next brick as best as you can. And that's the thing. It's small pieces, layer upon layer, over time, and eventually you'll have a great structure there. And so it's less about burning yourself out and doing everything in one go, and more about small pieces consistently.
I fully support that. And I think you've just built a lovely little picture there of building that brick one at a time.
That's it.
Is there anything that I should have asked you so far, Brad, that you haven't allowed yourself to really bloom about?
I don't know, actually. I think your questions have been very good, very intriguing questions. I think the thing I would say that is, if you're struggling to know what you want to say to people, if you're struggling to know what to put in your social media content, put in your marketing, put on your website, if you don't know who you're actually talking to, there's a very good chance that you're not clear on your message. And I always say to people, if you don't know your message, you don't know your market. If you get clear on your message, the people that you're supposed to be talking to suddenly will come out of the woodwork and will be there in front of you, and they will love what you have to say. And so get clear on your message, and everything else will follow.
Well, I want to appreciate you, because just for the benefit of any listeners, we had a little bit of a sort of a structure that I had written down over here on this screen. And Brad said to me, let's just go with it. And I think that's the message that I'm going to take away from this, that there is a butler in your mind, and he or she will serve you what you need as long as you're allowing the butler to serve you. And sometimes rip up the script and just let it flow. That's
it. Yeah. If you know the point that you want to make, and that's the thing. So I'm working with somebody at the moment who has a creative agency, and they are so skilled at unpacking a large part of what I do with their clients to understand their brand. But what I do is I take that a step further, and I make that really succinct into a point. And that's the thing that I'm trying to say here is, if you know the point that you want to make, you can come at it from so many different angles that you can always kind of tie it back into that ultimate point, and to lead people where they need to be to understand what it is that you're presenting to them. And so get clear on that point. What is the point that you're making in everything that you do, in your content, in your conversations, in your networking? What is that point that you want people to say, aha, I get it?
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you to leave the listeners with 3 fundamental truths of your mission to allow them to think about. And by the way, they're all being collected up and being put in a book that's coming out. So Brad Bucceri, what are your 3 fundamentals for leading a long, healthy, good life?
So for me, it comes back to know your anchor. What keeps you focused? What is it that is your foundation that you can go back to every day? Re-anchor yourself. Know your purpose. Live that out deliberately. How can you apply what it is that you're here to do in the lives of other people on a day-to-day basis, whether that's in your business, in your job, in your family, and make a positive impact in the lives of others. We get the biggest sense of fulfillment and the biggest bursts of energy when we do good things for other people. And so it's less about us and more about them. I would say those are my 3.
Anchor, purpose, and impact.
Yes.
Kind of I love framework, so it's a bit of the peer. Positive impact and action. Anchor, sorry. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a Prime Your Life and Speak and Serve production today. If you've enjoyed this and want more conversations like this, then please do subscribe, like, and comment. And that way we can bring other great guests into this format for you to take action. And I would implore all of you to just listen and take a minute to think, that's been 45 minutes of my life. What could I apply and implement as a result of what Brad's just given us to think about? Brad, I appreciate you for your time and your insights. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It's been really great, Chris. Thank you.
In the can.